The California sun hung low on the horizon, casting a golden glow across the winding coastal road. A sleek red Ferrari purred along the asphalt, its occupants basking in a rare moment of tranquility. Behind the wheel sat Robert Downey Jr., his eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Beside him, Scarlett Johansson reclined in the passenger seat, her hair dancing in the wind that slipped through the open window. Their destination was a high-profile charity gala in Beverly Hills, an event that promised a night of flashing cameras and carefully crafted sound bites. But for now, they savored the freedom of the open road, two Hollywood icons momentarily untethered from the demands of their larger-than-life personas. The car's engine hummed a soothing melody, punctuated only by their occasional laughter and easy banter. As they rounded a bend, the fuel warning light blinked to life on the dashboard. Robert's brow furrowed slightly, eliciting a playful chuckle from Scarlett. The great Tony Stark, caught off guard by something as mundane as an empty gas tank? She teased, her eyes twinkling with mirth. Robert's response was a self-deprecating shrug and a quip about even superheroes needing pit stops. Just ahead, a solitary gas station materialized like an oasis in the desert. Its faded sign and weathered pumps stood in stark contrast to the gleaming Ferrari that now pulled up beside them. As Robert began to refuel, Scarlett stepped out, stretching languidly, before making her way towards the dimly lit convenience store. Neither of them noticed the two figures lounging against their motorcycles, predatory eyes following Scarlett's every move. The larger of the two bikers, a mountain of a man with arms adorned in intricate tattoos and a thick beard that seemed to devour half his face, let out a low whistle as Scarlett walked past. His companion, leaner but no less intimidating with a gold tooth that caught the fading sunlight, chuckled darkly. "Well, well," he drawled. "Looks like Hollywood's come slumming." Their eyes met in silent agreement, a wordless pact sealed with predatory grins. As Scarlett disappeared into the store, they dismounted their bikes with practiced ease. The creak of their leather jackets and the heavy thud of their boots on concrete seemed to echo in the quiet evening air. They moved with the confidence of men accustomed to taking what they wanted, consequences be damned. Outside, Robert finished at the pump, his actor's intuition prickling with unease. Through the grimy store window, he watched the bikers' calculated approach, the way they positioned themselves around Scarlett like wolves circling their prey. Years of navigating both Hollywood's cutthroat landscape and life's unexpected turns had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. This, he knew with certainty, was more than just a chance encounter. Inside the store, Scarlett felt the shift in the atmosphere, her body tensing instinctively. The larger biker leaned against the counter beside her, his presence oppressive and deliberately invasive. His partner lingered a few steps back, gold tooth glinting as he maintained a lecherous grin. Scarlett remained outwardly composed, her years in the spotlight serving her well, but when they subtly blocked her path, she knew this situation was rapidly spiraling beyond her control. "Well, ain't this a surprise?" the bearded giant rumbled, his voice a gravelly bass that seemed to vibrate through the store's dingy interior. "A star like you, all alone in a place like this. Dangerous, don't you think?" His words dripped with menace, barely disguised as concern. Scarlett's grip on her newly purchased coffee cup tightened imperceptibly. "I appreciate your concern," she replied, her tone cool and controlled, "but I assure you, I'm perfectly fine." She made to step around them, but the leaner biker mirrored her movement, his gold tooth catching the flickering fluorescent light as he grinned. Now, he drawled. "No need to rush off. We're just being friendly, ain't we?" His eyes raked over her in a way that made Scarlett's skin crawl. She'd faced her share of overzealous fans and paparazzi, but this was different. These men exuded a tangible threat that set every nerve on edge. Outside, Robert had seen enough. his expression hardened, jaw set with determination, moving with the quiet confidence that had made him a legend both on screen and off. He strode towards the store entrance. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifting palpably with his arrival. Scarlett's eyes flicked towards Robert, relief washing over her features for a split second before her composure reasserted itself. The bikers, however, were slower to react, their bravado momentarily faltering in the face of this unexpected development. The larger one uncrossed his arms, sizing up Robert with a sneer that didn't quite mask his uncertainty. "And who might you be?" he growled, trying to regain control of the situation. Robert, however, paid him no mind, his gaze fixed solely on Scarlett. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual but laden with meaning. Scarlett nodded, her reply steady. "Just finishing up. We should get going." The leaner biker let out a forced chuckle, his confidence clearly shaken but not yet broken. "Hey now, no need to cut the party short. We were just getting acquainted." His words hung in the air, a challenge and a threat rolled into one. Robert took a deliberate step forward, his presence seeming to fill the cramped store. "I think," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight that made even the larger biker hesitate, "it's time for you to apologize to the lady and be on your way." The tension in the air was palpable, a powder keg waiting for a spark. For a long moment no one moved, the only sound the hum of the refrigerators and the distant rush of cars on the highway. The lean biker's smirk faltered, uncertainty creeping into his eyes. He glanced at his larger companion, seeking reassurance, but found only a mirror of his own wavering resolve. Robert didn't blink, didn't shift his stance. He simply stood there, an immovable object against which their bravado crumbled. "Look, man," the leaner one finally broke the silence, his voice lacking its earlier swagger. "We were just messing around. No harm meant." And it wasn't quite an apology, but it was as close as they were likely to get. Robert's gaze remained steady, unyielding. The message was clear. It wasn't enough. Scarlett, sensing the shift in power, folded her arms and fixed the bikers with a withering glare. "Pathetic," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The single word seemed to hang in the air, a final nail in the coffin of their machismo. The larger man's jaw clenched, his massive fists balling at his sides, but even he recognized a lost cause when he saw one. With a grunt that might have been an apology, or might have been a curse, he grabbed his friend's arm and yanked him towards the exit. As they reached the door, the bearded giant cast one last look over his shoulder, his eyes burning with humiliation and barely contained rage. "This ain't over," he snarled, the words more a promise than a threat. Robert watched them go, his body still coiled with tension. Years of experience had taught him that men like that rarely let go of their wounded pride so easily. He turned to Scarlett, his eyes questioning. She nodded, a silent affirmation that she was okay. Without a word, they made their way back to the Ferrari, both acutely aware of the bikers mounting their motorcycles nearby. As they pulled out onto the highway, Scarlett's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Two pinpoints of light appeared in the gathering dusk, growing steadily larger. "Robert," she said, her voice taut, "we've got company." He nodded grimly, having expected as much. "They're waiting for the right moment," he murmured, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Scarlett glanced at him, a mixture of concern and determination in her eyes. "And what do we do?" she asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Robert's lips curled into a knowing smirk, a glimmer of the Tony Stark charm breaking through the tension. "We don't give them one," he replied, his foot pressing down on the accelerator. The Ferrari surged forward, its engine roaring to life with newfound urgency. Behind them, the bikers accelerated in pursuit, their headlights growing larger in the mirror. What had begun as a leisurely drive was now transforming into something far more dangerous, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse on the winding coastal highway. The night air whipped through the Ferrari as Robert expertly guided it along the curves of the coastal road. His hands moved with precision, each adjustment of the wheel calculated and smooth. Beside him, Scarlett remained alert, her eyes constantly checking the mirrors. The motorcycles maintained their distance, never falling too far behind, but not yet making their move. "They're toying with us," Scarlett observed, her voice tight with tension. Robert nodded, his focus unwavering from the road ahead. "They think they have the advantage," he replied, a hint of grim amusement in his tone. "Let's see how long that lasts." As if on cue, one of the motorcycles surged forward, its engine roaring as it closed the gap. The biker with the gold tooth pulled alongside the Ferrari, his face twisted into a manic grin. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a heavy chain. With practiced ease, he began to swing it, the metal links whistling through the air. Scarlett's breath caught in her throat as she realized his intent. He was aiming for their windshield. Robert, however, had anticipated the move. Just as the biker let the chain fly, he executed a swift, precise maneuver. The Ferrari swerved, the chain missing by mere inches. The metallic clatter of it hitting the asphalt echoed in the night, quickly swallowed by the roar of engines. The failed attack seemed to enrage the bikers further. They pressed closer, their motorcycles flanking the Ferrari on both sides. The bearded giant pulled even with Robert's window, his face a mask of fury. He gestured aggressively, shouting something that was lost in the wind, but his intent was clear. He wanted them to pull over. Scarlett's eyes darted between the two threats, her mind racing. "Any bright ideas?" she asked, her voice steady despite the danger. Robert's response was to downshift suddenly, the Ferrari's engine growling as it surged forward. The unexpected burst of speed caught the bikers off guard, forcing them to fall back momentarily. "They think they have us cornered," Robert explained, his eyes never leaving the road. "But they've forgotten one thing." Scarlett raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. A small, determined smile played on his lips as he finished. "We're not just actors. We're Avengers." With that, he pushed the Ferrari to its limits, the speedometer climbing rapidly. The road ahead narrowed, winding even more treacherously along the cliffside. Where most drivers would have slowed, Robert maintained his speed, using the Ferrari's superior handling to navigate the turns with precision. The bikers, caught off guard by this unexpected show of skill, struggled to keep up. As they rounded a particularly sharp bend, Scarlett spotted something in the distance, a roadblock. Police cars sat across the highway, their lights painting the night in red and blue. For a moment, relief washed over her, thinking their ordeal was about to end, but then she saw Robert's expression tighten, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's not real," he said, his voice low and urgent. Scarlett's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The roadblock was a setup, likely orchestrated by the bikers or their associates. If they stopped, they'd be walking right into a trap. But if they didn't stop— "Robert," she began, but he was already acting. With a move that seemed to defy physics, Robert steered the Ferrari off the road entirely. They plunged down a steep, unpaved slope, the car's suspension groaning in protest. Scarlett gripped her seat, her heart pounding as they bumped and jolted their way down. Behind them, they heard the screech of tires as the bikers realized what was happening. As they reached the bottom of the slope, Robert skillfully maneuvered them back onto a narrow, poorly maintained road. It wasn't on any map, but it ran parallel to the highway above. The fake police cars couldn't follow, and the bikers would have a hard time navigating the treacherous descent on their motorcycles. For the moment, at least, they had turned the tables. As the adrenaline of their escape began to subside, a heavy silence fell over the Ferrari's interior. Robert's eyes remained fixed on the rough road ahead, his jaw set in concentration. Scarlett, her breath finally evening out, found herself studying his profile in the dim light of the dashboard. She saw not just the action hero the world knew, but a man grappling with the weight of the moment. "You know," she said softly, breaking the silence, "most people would have panicked back there, or at least shown some fear." Robert's lips quirked in a small, wry smile. "Who says I wasn't afraid?" he replied, his voice carrying a note of self-reflection. "Fear isn't about not being scared. It's about what you do with that fear." The words hung between them, laden with meaning. Scarlett nodded slowly, understanding. "Is that what drives you?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Turning fear into action?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering her question. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, introspective. "It's more than that," he said. "It's about responsibility. The roles we play, the personas we create, they're not just characters. They become part of who we are, part of what people expect from us. And sometimes that expectation is what pushes us to be better, to do more." Scarlett leaned back in her seat, Robert's words resonating deeply. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted. "But you're right. We're not just playing heroes on screen. In a way, we've become symbols." She paused, a rueful smile playing on her lips. "Though I doubt many symbols find themselves in high-speed chases on coastal highways," Robert chuckled, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. "Maybe not," he conceded. "But that's the thing about being in the public eye. Every action, every decision, it all carries weight. Those guys back there, they saw us as targets because of who we are, but they also underestimated us for the same reason." As they continued down the rough road, the weight of their shared experience settled over them. It wasn't just about escaping danger, it was a stark reminder of the complex reality of their lives. The glamour and adulation came with a price, a constant balancing act between public perception and personal authenticity. "Do you ever wish for a simpler life?" Scarlett asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert's response was immediate but thoughtful. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember the good we can do, the inspiration we can provide. It's a privilege, even with all its challenges." As the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, Robert finally steered the Ferrari back onto a main road. They were miles from where their ordeal had begun, the landscape having shifted from coastal cliffs to rolling hills. Both felt the weight of the night's events, but also a newfound appreciation for their shared experiences. "You know," Robert mused, breaking a comfortable silence, "I think those guys did us a favor." Scarlett turned to him, surprise evident on her face. "How do you figure that?" she asked, genuinely curious. Robert's response was thoughtful, measured. "They reminded us of something important, that we're more than just our roles, more than what the public sees." Scarlett nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "We're real people, with real strengths and vulnerabilities," she added. "And sometimes it takes a moment of crisis to remember that." Robert smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression rarely seen outside of his closest circles. "Exactly. We faced a real threat, and we overcame it together. Not as Black Widow and Iron Man, but as ourselves." As they drove on, the conversation flowed more freely. They shared stories of other moments when reality had intruded on their. As the sun peeked over the horizon, bathing the landscape in soft golden light, Robert and Scarlett found themselves at a small, nondescript diner. The Ferrari, now dusty and bearing a few new scratches, sat in the parking lot like a battle-worn chariot. Inside, over steaming cups of coffee, they continued their conversation, their voices low and intimate. "You know," Scarlett began, stirring her coffee absently, "I think this whole experience has given me a new perspective on what we do." Robert raised an eyebrow, inviting her to continue. She took a sip before elaborating. "We spend so much time pretending to be heroes, but last night we actually had to be heroes." Robert nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a different kind of pressure, isn't it?" he mused. "On set, we have second takes, stunt doubles, safety nets. Out there," he gestured vaguely towards the window, "out there it's all real. No cuts, no reshoots." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their breakfast, stacks of pancakes and plates of eggs and bacon. As they ate, they continued to reflect on the night's events, finding new depths to their shared experience with each passing moment. "I wonder," Scarlett said between bites, how this will change us going forward, not just as actors, but as people. Robert chewed thoughtfully before responding, I think that's up to us. We can let it be just another crazy Hollywood story, or we can learn from it, grow from it. As they finished their meal and prepared to face the day ahead, Robert and Scarlett found themselves lingering, neither quite ready to break the bubble of understanding they had created. The charity gala that had been their original destination seemed a world away now, almost trivial in comparison to what they had experienced. You know what I've realized? Robert said, his voice carrying a note of revelation. Scarlett looked at him expectantly. Our greatest strength isn't in our fame or our roles. It's in our ability to adapt, to face the unexpected and come out stronger. Scarlett nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. And in the connections we make, she added. Last night, we weren't co-stars or celebrities. We were just two people looking out for each other. Robert reached across the table, giving her hand a gentle squeeze of agreement. The gesture was simple, but loaded with shared understanding. As they finally stood to leave, both felt a sense of transformation. The night's adventure had stripped away the veneer of Hollywood glamour, revealing the resilient, resourceful individuals beneath. They stepped out into the morning light, ready to face whatever came next. Not as icons on a screen, but as real people who had discovered their own capacity for heroism.